Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to look at science books, not hardcore science, but just like the philosophy ones, introductory books, books which introduce us to elementary science, some basics, some fundamentals, so that if we come across a science passage, we are not suddenly staring in space. It suddenly doesn't shock us as if, oh, what am I supposed to do? Of course, this problem is mostly faced by non-science background people, people who left science. Either most of them would have left science after 10th, but even those of you who have left after 12th also face this problem. Okay, so and surprisingly, some people who did science even in their graduation level, for example, even engineers or proper, like BSc or physics honors or something, even they sometimes face problems in science. So it's not just people from non-science background, but of course, majority of the people would be from there. So I would look at, initially I will look at introductory sort of books which take care of almost everything, they try to do that. And then I will look at two, three books in a more narrower sense. Of course, none of the book would be dense, none of them would require prior knowledge. So I have chosen books keeping that in mind. Again, I will say the same thing as I said in the philosophy books class, or rather video, that you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to read these books. You can read whatever you want, do your own research. These are just my suggestions. All right. So let's begin. Uh, I will not hesitate even for a moment that this should be the first book. But before that, let me look at another book, which is hardly a book. It is almost like an essay, but it became super popular about 2-3 years back. It is written by a scientist, a physicist called Carlo Rovelli, and it's called Seven Brief Lessons in Physics. Okay, on physics. And he then ended up, because his book became so popular, so I'm sure publishers were after his life, and he ended up writing at least one more book, which is on time. But this is the book which made him famous. This is hardly a book, as I said. See, the font is also extremely thick. All right, and it's like 79 pages. It's hardly, it's like an essay. Why one should read this book, especially to start with it, is it'll give you an idea of how passionate scientists are. And you know that science can be beautiful. It is not as dry uh, as people think it is. And, so the beauty of science and why they do it. And, some basics also you will learn. Of course, not too much. I mean, what can you learn here? But a very decent book to start. Okay, Seven Brief Lessons on Physics by Carlo Rovelli, an Italian physicist. Okay, now let's come to the book that I was talking about. I will not hesitate even for a moment. That people should start with this book, even though it is now old, and in science, as you would know, that people keep, or rather, new discoveries keep happening, and so new books keep coming, which are updates on these new developments in science and so on. But I don't know, if you have been following science, you'll figure out that nothing much fundamentally has changed. Forget in the past 10, 15 years since this book came out, it hasn't happened for a pretty decent amount of time. In fact, there is a book and some essays written on the same thing. So I don't think you should worry about that. And of course, the fundamentals still, nothing fundamentally has changed in science. For example, when Einstein came into the picture with his theory of relativity and all that, what is known as classical physics, or another term for that could be Newtonian physics, that was shaken. Okay, now nothing like that has happened in the past, I think, many years, a few decades, in fact. So this is a book written by a non-scientist, though. It's called A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. Bill Bryson is actually a humor, or rather travel/humor writer. So he wrote a lot of travel stuff, but he's very funny. Like, he's extremely funny. If you get his jokes. He's originally an American, but he lives in UK now. And this is a beautiful book. A short history of nearly everything is science, not everything, but short history in terms of science. And again, I try to choose books which are written by people who write well. Okay, so he's right there amongst the best. Okay, so let me read a couple of paragraphs to give you an inkling as to his writing style and will it click with you and so on. So this is the introduction. So he says, welcome and congratulations. I'm delighted that you could make it. I'm delighted that you could make it. Getting here wasn't easy, I know. In fact, I suspect it was a little tougher than you realize. So he's talking about being born, you know. To begin with, for you to be here now, trillions of drifting atoms had somehow to assemble in an intricate and intriguingly obliging manner to create you. It's an arrangement so specialized and particular that it has never been tried before and will only exist this once, meaning the uniqueness of you, of each one of us. For the next many years, and brackets we hope, so that's the slightly funny part. For the next many years, these tiny particles will uncomplainingly engage in all the billions of deft, cooperative efforts necessary to keep you intact and let you experience the supremely agreeable but generally underappreciated state known as existence. You know, so beautiful writer and very funny. The funny part didn't come here too much, but it will. And brilliant book, and it takes care of all the areas, you know, like cosmology, physics, biology, evolution, which is a part of biology, and so on. So very nice, very nice. I think this is a beautiful book to start. Okay. Now, this 7 brief lessons in physics, on physics, sorry, I think the title was inspired, I'm not sure, but I think the title was inspired by a classic book called Six Easy Pieces by Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman is considered to be one of the greatest physicists, okay? In fact, it is said about him, so he's won the Nobel Prize in Physics, I think in 1960s sometime. So another Nobel Prize winner of physics has said this about Feynman, that there are 2 kinds of geniuses. One who, when they do things, we are surprised and we love it, but then we tend to think that, you know, if we work hard enough, we will be able to do it. I'm sure he's talking about his kind of people, not us, but yeah, whatever. And then he said that there is a second type of genius who, when they do things, it's pure magic. So I'm obviously paraphrasing, but and he said Feynman belongs to the second category, who even to another Nobel Prize winner in physics, to someone like him or her, Feynman is a magician in physics. Okay, so this is actually a part of something called Feynman Lectures in Physics. Some of you may have heard of those. It's super popular and whatever. Now, this is not an easy book, even though this is, designed in a way so as to appeal to a layperson, but it is definitely not easy. However, if you give it your time, it will repay you. That's my guarantee. And it is, again, not very thick, but beautiful. It talks about atoms, quantum physics, and so on. So Feynman's specialty was quantum mechanics. So again, very nice book. If you want an easier book, and again, you want a thinner book than Short History of Nearly Everything, and you want a book to be written by a scientist, and you know it should encompass everything, then this is a decent book. It's written by a British scientist called Peter Atkins. It's called Galileos Finger, the 10 Great Ideas of Science. Okay, and so what it has talked about are evolution, DNA, energy, entropy, atoms, symmetry, quanta, cosmology, space-time, and arithmetic. So these are the 10 things it has focused on. Very nice book, very nice introductory book. The aim of this book is introduction, and so pretty cool. By the way, coming back to Feynman, you can read other books by him. For example, there is a book of sort of his conversations with, other people called "Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman." It's a decent book to read. There's another one which is a biography of his. So if you through biography also you can get introduced to some physics and similar things. So it's called Genius. Okay, by James Gleick, I think it should be pronounced. So, very nice book, amazing. It'll give you a first-hand window into the mind of a genius. Okay, what is it that makes these days genius word is used whenever? I mean, not correct. When you read a book like this, you'll understand that genius word should be restricted to a select few. There is another genius that you would want to probably read. One second. This is our genius from India, Ramanujan. So the man who knew infinity. This is again a biography of his. What is it? What did he do, and how did he think, and so on. I hope you have heard of Ramanujan. He's considered to be, again, probably a genius's genius, like a kind of genius who would be a magician to other geniuses. So, again, beautiful, very nice book to read, and an amazing person to know about. Unfortunately, he died very early. All right. Now, if you want a more recent book, to figure out the recent developments and a slightly more dense and going really hardcore into cosmology, then this is a beautiful book, okay? The Fabric of the Cosmos by Brian Greene. It is again slightly old, but then well worth your time, and hardly anything new has come in science after this book. So beautiful, but fairly dense. So you can go to it after reading one of the books that I mentioned, or some other introductory book that you come across. Okay, so, but a book well worth it. All right. Now let's look at a few, as I said, narrower things. In fact, before I get into that, I want to talk about a book which is definitely not for beginners, mostly, and definitely not for people who are from non-English medium schools or non-English medium backgrounds. They should give some time to some few other science books and then come to this. But I still want to talk about this book because this is one of those books which one should read in one's lifetime. Like you should. Otherwise, it's incomplete, especially if you get into reading. And this is one of those ones you have to read, because this is the book which started it all as far as evolutionary biology and to a decent extent biology is concerned. So I'm sure you would be guessing. So The Origin of Species by one of the greatest scientists who's ever lived, Charles Darwin. Okay. So now this book looks very big and very thick because I've bought a special edition which was illustrated, but otherwise this book is not so thick. I mean, I think it should be 300-400 pages. But because I've bought, with very thick pages and there are colored pictures all over the place. So the entire book is full of illustrations. All right. So that's why this book looks very thick. But you should, everybody who can should read The Origin of Species. On the Origin of Species is the full title by Charles Darwin. So maybe not immediately, but keep it, in your pipeline. Read it, and if possible, read it once you read 2-3 these books. Give it a shot, especially English medium people background. It is not that dense. It is not that difficult. Anybody can understand it, but of course, it requires some effort. That's why I'm saying that you shouldn't go to it the first thing. Honestly speaking, one can, but beware. That's all that I'm saying. However, absolutely worth it. Okay, now let's talk about those slightly narrow books, but wonderful books which have won awards, bestsellers, outstanding books. So this is one book. It's called Longitude. Some people will pronounce it as Longitude. Anyway, so Longitude by Deva Sobel, and superlative book. It is about the, let's call it, the discovery of longitude and so on, and how before it was figured, what kind of problems the seamen used to face and so on. So, but wonderfully written. It's a page turner. It will read like a novel. Amazing, amazing. And though it does not introduce you to science, but could be the first book that you want to start with, and you will not regret it even for a moment. It'll almost read like a mystery thriller. All right, beautiful book. Then this is a book which won the Pulitzer Prize, and it's called The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert. She is a staff writer, I think, for The New Yorker, and The New Yorker is known for its writers, meaning they have a highly selective process for their writers, and they need to display outstanding writing skills. And so, for example, Malcolm Gladwell, you may have heard of him, a huge bestseller and stuff. So he's a New Yorker writer. So again, beautiful book. This is about the fact that the world has seen 5 mass extinctions. And a mass extinction, as the name implies, is when most species die out. And according to her, whatever she researched, as in not first-hand research, but her research on the research, because she's, I think, like a journalist. So so the book is about that we are probably in the midst of a 6th extinction, and probably we are a part of it. A part of it, not just as a cause, which most probably we are, but we may become the culprit also of that 6th extinction. Amazing book, amazingly written, almost a page turner. Again, you won't regret it at all. This book is The Evolution of Beauty by Richard Frum, and this book is sort of like, I won't say a challenge, but like a question mark on a lot of evolutionary biologists, let's call it belief system or thought process, wherein when they look at evolution, they think everything is natural selection. Now, this has been countered ever since natural selection as the perhaps the only cause. Some proponents of it came into the picture. So the opponents came almost instantaneously. So it has been always opposed, but then they have always had a backseat, because these guys, the proponents of natural selection being the only thing, have been in the limelight and whatever. So, but then this conversation, this debate has been ongoing, and this is another one of that. So he says that it is not all that. There are other things which can lead to evolution. For example, in this case, choosing a mate based on beauty, okay, attraction. So basically, pleasure. That's it. Okay, no genetic framework there, and so on. And he's not the originator as such of this idea. Darwin himself, the big man himself, proposed this. Okay, so this is based on this guy's research and other research and so on. But again, a wonderfully written book. You will be engrossed and amazing, and it will give you a different. Just in case you know about natural selection, whatever, this will be a slightly different take on evolution. Again, beautiful. And finally, a book which is, I mean, I don't even have words. The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. Oliver Sacks unfortunately died, I think, last year, or maybe last year. Supposedly one of the greatest scientists, at least one of the greatest scientist writers. And he was a neurologist. So this book is neurology/psychology. It is basically case studies of his few patients. One of them is about whom the title is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for for a hat. I mean, this is actually true, okay? So I won't break it to you. Read it, and you will see that it's amazing. And independent chapters, because each chapter is about one particular patient related to one problem in the brain and so on. But as I told you, Oliver Sacks, as a writer, is very popular, and brilliant writer, knows how to engage us in or on a page, and amazing. If you want, I can read probably something. Neurology's favorite word is deficit, denoting an impairment or incapacity of neurological function. Loss of speech, loss of language, loss of memory, loss of vision, loss of dexterity, loss of identity, and myriad other lacks and losses of specific functions or faculties. For all of these dysfunctions, another favorite term, we have privative words of every sort, and so on and so forth. Then, next para, the scientific study of the relationship between brain and mind began in 1861 when Broca in France found that specific difficulties in the expressive use of speech, aphasia, consistently followed damage to a particular portion of the left hemisphere of the brain. So this was just to give you an idea that you will understand this book. So there is no problem if this book is your first book. And again, you will not regret it. So amazing. Of course, there are many books on science, but these are the ones which I am comfortable in recommending for starters, and 100% for non. If people who read science but haven't read these, I have no qualms and no fear in recommending these. You will love them. They are amazing. All right. So thanks a lot. Thank you. And I will come up with another area in the next video. Thank you so much.